Tampering, you say. Tampering. What does that word have to do with college football? Well, everything. Well, are the three words that I thought when I read this really good, informative, deep-diving feature from Alex Scarborough on ESPN.com a couple of days ago, and I've taken a couple of days to marinate on this. There are a lot of changes always happening in life and in college football. Some changes are like if you were to take a stone and you toss it in a lake. There's a ripple effect. You could tell something just went in the water, but by and large, it's not a big deal. Then other changes are like when an asteroid hits the ocean and it affects everything. It affects the entire planet. I've seen Armageddon. I've seen Deep Impact. Same year, by the way. Crazy how that works. So what is this? Well, the transfer portal's the asteroid. And what happened was when the transfer portal really became a thing, transfers were always a thing, but when the portal really became a thing, you thought to yourself, or maybe you thought to yourself, I don't want to put words in your mouth, oh good, kids can transfer. Hey, I got no problem with that. Most of the coaches mentioned or directly quoted in the story I'm about to talk about, they have no problem with that. Most of them just openly say, it's not the transferring I have a problem with. But as we said, and there's another couple of points I want to point out that we said last year, when this started to happen, there are going to be some unintended consequences. We're just going to have to deal with it. You can't take all this good and not get any of the bad that comes in the door with it. So really last year, I guess time runs together now. Last year, around this time actually, when we were talking about the transfer portal, I did a segment and I told you a couple of things, among others, were coming as a result of the transfer portal. One was you were used to hearing about high school scouting departments in a college football program. That's just recruiting. They've always had that. But I told you that more and more we were hearing from coaching staffs and people on the road in the recruiting world, colleges, college football programs are developing their own separate college scouting department inside the infrastructure of their program. What does that mean? To put a finer point on it, it meant even last year and before that, to be honest with you, college staffs were preparing to scout other college football teams, not for the purposes of game planning, but for the purposes potentially of recruiting, or as you know it, the transfer portal, because now college players move very freely and very often from one program to the other. The second thing I told you, and this was going to be the more important part, is the NCAA has no prayer of policing this. I don't care what rule you write. You can write all the rules or laws in society. If there was a law against something but you knew they weren't going to enforce it, would you be scared to do it? Of course you wouldn't. And it's the same way right now. Tampering is a big problem. Tampering just means when you got a player on your team and he's a sophomore, hey, that used to be the end of the game for me. Once they're in high school and they commit to a place, we're done. There's a 99% chance I'll never really interact with him. But now things have changed. I got some quotes I'm going to read you in just a second. So I want to really preface this and get this quote out of the way, or get this statement out of the way, because I know that even as I utter this statement, I'm going to have some ignorance in the comments. I know this is America. That's point one. And number two, I know kids are free to transfer, and I'm not against transferring. I'm all for it. There's no law being broken or rule being broken when a kid transfers. They're free to do it. They should be free to do it. I want to state that, and then I'm going to bet you $5 that by the end of this video in the comment section, someone comes down there and says, oh, what? You think these kids should just be chained to a program and never be able to go where they want to? No, I don't think that, sir or ma'am. No, I don't. But what's the crux of the issue here? As I said, the crux is not coaches being upset the kids are transferring. They may not be happy about it, but that's not what they're trying to stand in the way of. The big problem is tampering and other coaching staffs interfering with the guys on their roster. Now, you can see why that would upset a college coach to know that, a defensive backs coach or a quality control guy from a rival or maybe someone from another conference is messing with kids on their roster. So this ESPN feature piece, you can still find it on ESPN.com, from Alex Scarborough. It quoted several coaches, and I'm about to read you some of them. But a prominent high school coach who was anonymous, so we can only guess who this is, said that he estimates up to 60% of college staffs are taking part in this kind of behavior. Now, I think that's a little bit high, but I'll get back to that in a second. But I want to remind you, why would a high school coach have something to say about this? Well, the high school coaches, friends, are the ones in a lot of cases who are used as the go-between. Because it's not always as simple as if I'm coaching running backs at Texas Tech and I want to talk to a kid at Baylor, I just pick up the phone and call the kid at Baylor. That's not the way it happens. The way it happens is maybe I call his trainer, or maybe I call his high school coach. Case in point here. Or maybe I remember his cousin, or I've established contact with his aunt from recruiting. Or maybe, and this is what's happening a lot, and you can read about this in this feature, maybe there's some kids on my roster that played high school ball with that kid, and they're the ones that I use. So all these things are happening. I don't buy the 60% now. I do want to say that. I don't think it's quite 60% of college programs who are doing this, but I think the number is plenty substantial enough to where it's gotten a lot of attention and it's rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. The problem here is the policing aspect. No one thinks the NCAA is capable of doing a thing about this. Here's the bottom line. When it comes to tampering in college football, the sport's going to have to police itself. Because I was listening to some of the quotes and reading some of the quotes in this feature. Eli Drinkwitz, here's a quote from Eli. What kind of ferociousness is behind the enforcement if you have people on tape admitting to violations and they're still actively coaching? Here's Sonny Dykes at SMU. You want people in the sport to be ethical enough where they don't fall prey to that, but you got to win, and you got a high-pressure job, and you have all these things, and then all of a sudden you look and you go, oh, they didn't punish anyone, and they're not going to punish me, so why not? Let me translate that for you. We don't believe the NCAA is capable of taking a leak without getting the front of its pants wet. They're certainly not capable of enforcing this, and our evidence is they got folks on tape in another sport talking about openly paying kids to come play for said school, and they did nothing about it. So if they got federal wiretaps, and that's really not producing any kind of punishment, then why would we believe that they're going to be capable of enforcing this? And they're right. No college coach believes the NCAA is capable of enforcing this, but a lot of college coaches are rubbed the wrong way about it. You got some bad actors. I still believe, contrary to the number that was in this report, a majority are in the right here, and a majority would much rather see a sport where it's totally clean. Maybe they're participating in it because they feel like they have to keep up. What's the answer? The answer is not the NCAA. It rarely is in college athletics. The answer is going to be at the conference level. You got to get your you-know-what together at conference level, and conference commissioners have an extra weapon in their holster that the NCAA does not have. It's called TV money. Greg Sankey in Birmingham, Alabama has got TV money in his pocket. And so if you get your 14 head coaches together and you guys agree, we don't want this, well, then all of a sudden the SEC doesn't need the NCAA. The SEC can decide how it wants to handle the distribution of its TV money. And so what about removing the NCAA to a degree from this equation? Greg Sankey, just as an example, as the SEC commissioner says, I got this TV money that we distribute to you guys evenly every year, 20, 30, 40, whatever $million. You want to see your revenue pie cut? Let us catch you tampering. Forget about the folks in Indianapolis. You need to worry about the sheriff in Birmingham. Because if you guys agree that you want a clean sport and you want tampering to be removed and you don't want to have to worry about it, just give me the power. Give me the say-so, and I'll hold that TV money over the heads of your programs. And if you violate this rule, then you're losing that bag for the year. Guess what would all of a sudden happen? What would all of a sudden happen is no one would be looking at the NCAA saying, weak, ineffective. All of a sudden, they'd look and say, uh-oh, the burden of proof that the SEC needs may be a little bit different. The investigatory power or manner in which the conference were to go about this may be a little bit different. I need to be careful here. So I think only when the conferences get together at their level and decide that they're going to police themselves will you have any kind of legitimate answer to tampering. Because otherwise, it's going to go unchecked. I can promise you, if you're waiting on the NCAA, it's going to go unchecked. But I do want to point out before we move on here, guys like Luke Fickell at Cincinnati and Sam Pittman, they made another good point. Luke Fickell and Sam Pittman were, among others, on record in this piece by Alex Scarborough as saying, you know what? What this has shown us, even though we don't endorse tampering, is that the programs that are dead honest in the initial stages of recruiting a kid don't have to worry about this stuff as much. Because kids don't get on campus and find out I'm not getting what I was promised. You didn't get the hook in my lip by any means necessary in my high school days to get me on campus. And so, you largely have given me what you promised me. I'm far less apt to be gruntled I'm far less apt to be disgruntled is what I want to say because of that. So be honest. Takes care of a lot of issues. Just be honest. This is a problem that's not going away. Conferences, not the NCAA, are going to have to fix it and self-police.